Hi, I'm Domonique Townsend, CEO of We Optimize Work. I help leaders think differently in how they empower employees to solve problems and bring social impact in the workplace and continuous improvement overall. So I said if I see another trend about how people are working or how people are not working, that I was going to scream. Ah! Okay, I got that out of my system. A baby scream, but I had to get it out. I wanted to write out what happens when you adapt certain trends or you look at trends and you approach it tactically. That means when you are getting insights or tips from people, particularly there were some leaders who said that they saw something on TikTok and they're bringing it into their team. I want to show or demonstrate what happens when you are approaching things tactically, which leads overall to another trend, another trended thing that is happening that is impacting your team. But it's all boils down to how you are being intentional from a strategic standpoint with your team versus tactical in the completion of tasks. So I'm going to write out, let's lay this out on the X and Y axis. We're going to call this strategic intention. And here we have engagement. If you are approaching this tactically, which some of the leaders are doing, so let's say there's a task. You engage your team, you give it to them, and it feels good. The tasks work. The tasks that people are adapting or tips they are adapting or bringing into their team, they work. But what's happening is only happening here. The engagement may spark a little bit, go back down, go here, and then level out, and maybe even decrease. This is what happens when you're leading tactically. And that means task-driven leadership. And engagement. So the quiet quitting implies that people are doing just enough so they won't get fired. We have the bare minimum Mondays where leaders are looking at Mondays to say, well, let's not have Mondays be task loaded or heavy loaded on their demand by giving them an average of 3 to 5 tasks on a Monday and then putting the heavier project needs later on in the week. What happens is that is still tactical approach. So you might get a spike in your engagement because you have the Mondays be less demand, but let's look at the overall strategic purpose. What is the intention for the tasks that are being performed and how are they aligning with the overall objective? So if you look at it from a strategic standpoint, let's do red. When you look at engaging your team strategically, strategic intention, you are increasing how you're engaging your team every time. So say if you see a trend or an impact that you feel may be impacting your team, you're increasing how you're engaging them and you're engaging them on the front end. So we have just different stop points. You see, the more strategic you are in how you engage your team, you increase the level in how you engage your team, you're going up into a way that continues to increase. Tactical approaches give you a spike in engagement, but you're not as strategic. And that is what is happening. If people are not asked the right questions of how to solve problems, if people are not empowered to look at their day-to-day week strategically, but be empowered to be equipped with the resources, be empowered to know that when they share something, their voice is heard. When they speak up, they're not looked at as someone who is emotional or aggressive or someone who's intimidating. They're looked at as someone who can help solve a problem. So the more intentional you are and the more strategic you are as a leader, when you see when you see the trends, you won't have a fear to bring in a task without working with your people. Engage with them. Ask them the questions. I saw this recent thing of bare minimum Mondays. How do you feel when you come in on the week? Well, what about those 3 to 5 tasks? Because according to the bare minimum, with the 3 to 5 tasks and having a heavier load later in the week, are those 3 to 5 tasks that are being performed on Monday adding value in the first place? Are you decreasing or pushing off inefficiency to later in the week because you are not addressing it because of you don't want to have the big approach or burnout that's happening on a Monday? Well, if you're pushing back inefficiency, you're still going to have a disconnect, and you're still going to have an untapped opportunity in listening to the voice of your employees, the voice of what needs to be solved. Now, I drew this because this is how I'm thinking about it in my mind. I'll flesh it out another day of like really showing what are some steps that can happen in place if you see, and these are squiggles, but pretend they're words. Okay, so what's going to happen is at each stage, you're increasing your level of maturity in what is being applied. Here, this is where you don't necessarily have a strategic approach related to how you're engaging. Like that means performance pulse checks. That means engaging with your team. Are you having an innovation day that says every third Thursday we have an innovation day where we're looking at our current state of tasks that a certain function of the team is focusing on? Are you looking at the customer journey? Like those things will mean a high level of maturity because you're being more strategic and intentional in how you're engaging your team. But if you're you're in the beginning stages, you might talk to them once in a while. And the more that you have implemented actions that are consistent in how you're engaging your team or being more intentional with that, then you get to a higher level of maturity. So this is representing the level of maturity. If you're leading tactically, the maturity level does not necessarily increase. It maintains the status quo, or being complacent with, okay, well, we're getting the task. We have this goal that we need to meet, and you're reaching this, say a metric, or you're reaching an outcome that you haven't challenged or questioned to see how is this adding value. So when you see the trends, I said it's the trends. Don't allow the trends to scare you or have a fear-based approach in how you're engaging with your team, because all that is doing is giving you less than the potential of what can happen. If you look at the trends and say, okay, I see that this is happening. How is it impacting our team? What are we focusing on? If we are looking to decrease the workload on a Monday, is the workload adding value in the first place in how they're working? Are there opportunities to improve it? What is leading to the burnout and how we are engaging with each other each week, or the expectations that is happening? But I just wanted to lay this out just to spark a conversation with you so you can look at things differently when you read them. When you have leaders that are looking at trended outcomes, or people who do not know the uniqueness of your industry or the uniqueness of your team, what happens is you're leaving out the potential to engage your team in a conversation where they are helping empower a solution to the problem that you see that is being communicated out, or a trend that you see. But to just read a trend and apply a task or a solution, your job as a leader is not to have all the answers. You're not alone in having to figure out every single thing. The team, the people that are working directly on particular tasks, the team that is reporting to you, they have a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of solutions that if they were tapped in on, what you can do is you'll be ahead of the trend. I saw the bare minimum Mondays. I do understand that. But what we are doing is we have an innovation day, or every other week we have a performance pulse check where we're checking in to see what is the progress that is happening, how is your role adding significance, and showing them where their role adds value. From a personal standpoint, if we are looking at the well-being of employees, here's what we have incorporated that allows people to feel comfortable, or have the space to feel comfortable to communicate personal needs that supports them outside of work. So when they are able to show up in the workplace, they can show up with their full selves. But I hope this was helpful. I read an article and I just had to lay it out. Like when you look at that and you go back to the team with a solution and you're applying it, you're getting little peaks. But what happens is you're not going up. You're not increasing it. You're not going in a positive direction.